Hello and welcome to our next episode of Creative Glue, where we explore the commonalities that bind creative people together. I'm your host, Scott Robinson, and today I'm here with Thom Fennessey, who joins us all the way from LA. Welcome,
Thank
Thom.
you. Thanks very much.
Thom is a multi-award winning producer who has worked with some of the finest directors and artists across the globe and pretty much across every entertainment medium. From music videos and concert broadcast specials with artists from Creed to Foo Fighters to Rage Against the Machine and all the way through to Michael Jackson and Christina Aguilera. As the owner and EP of Collaboration Factory, a film, TV, and music video production company, he's created award-winning music videos for artists as diverse as Mariah Carey, Katy Perry, Elton John, Alicia Keys. The list goes on. We're just tipping the iceberg. As a producer, Thom has worked across every medium from documentaries and even commercials as big as the 2011 Super Bowl spot for Chevy, featuring the cast of Glee, which was named one of the best commercials of 2011 by the New York Times, and Adweek, which I hope we'll probably talk about a little bit later. With a career as diverse as this, he's done so much, and it's impossible to put into a snapshot. So let's just start with where it all begins, Thom, and what drove you to become a producer in the first place?
Thank you for that introduction. It's always funny to hear it. Because for me,
Slicing your life into 15 to 20
exactly.
seconds.
It's to me, it's always just, it's a job. It's a job I happen to love, but it's a job.
Yes.
Where did it start? I went to college for psychology originally, and then I switched over to theater, and then I switched that focus to theater management. So I thought I was going to produce plays, and I had grown up. My parents were, mad for the arts, and would take us to the theater, take us to museums, take us to all of these sort of cultural events. And what was funny was they had given us a budget that every month we had to sort of maintain. My father was all about learning how to budget. So it had to pay for us to get to school, pay for our school lunches, pay for, if we wanted to go to a movie or anything like that. However, if we wanted to go to the theater or a museum or any kind of cultural event, we just had to give them the receipts and they would give us the money back. And my sister and I came
That's
to
awesome.
realize if we just did that, we could actually make money by the end of the month.
I like
And
this.
my parents stuck to their plan. And my father worked for an airline. So even though I'm American, I lived in Europe for the first 15 years of my life. And we were living in London at the time. We lived in London for around 9 years. So we were, my sister became a professional painter, an artist. And I went off seeing some of the most extraordinary people on stage, for cheap ticket prices because I was a kid, up until the age of 15 when we moved to the States. So when I went to university, the first plan was psychology, and then I realized I couldn't fix people, and I switched to theater. And when I got out of school, my girlfriend at the time wanted to move to Los Angeles, and I was young and foolish and in love, and I moved to LA. And LA is not where theater originates. They come here on tours. There are now I know there are some very good theater, theaters here where they'll tour stuff before it goes to Broadway. But at the time, 32, 35 years ago, something like that, it was small theaters with actors trying to get television and film roles, and you would go in and it might not be the best thing you ever saw. And it was essentially an audition for something else that paid better.
Yeah.
And I got a job with a producer, and I was stage managing a play on Melrose. The producer and I got along. She was doing film and television. She offered me a job. I worked with her. It wasn't at the level that I thought it was going to be, and my next job was for a very famous producer, woman named Julia Phillips, and she had produced
Right.
The Sting and won the Oscar for it. She produced Taxi Driver. She produced Close Encounters
Wow.
of the Third Kind. She was at the top of her game, and I was her assistant. She had two assistants, and I was the second assistant, which meant a lot of, picking up the dry cleaning,
All the
all
interesting
the good
jobs.
stuff. Make sure the Mercedes is full of gas. Pick up pot in shoe boxes. This was not something that I knew that I was doing. I thought I was actually picking up shoes, and
Bliss in naivety.
complete and total until I got pulled over on Benedict Canyon by the cops. And that's how I learned that I was not actually picking up shoes. But, money got me out of that. Her money got me out of that. And she wrote a book called You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again. And within that book, which became a huge bestseller, she told every secret imaginable. She told stuff that shouldn't have been told and about people. And it's funny because when she was writing it and we were reading the book in galleys, we thought she was doing it late into the night as therapy, just to get it out as a diary. And I recall saying, you can never, let this out of the safe. And then she came into the office one day and said, I have a publisher. And we just sat there sort of astonished of, you want this out in the world. And at the time, she owned the rights to a book by Anne Rice called Interview with a Vampire, and all subsequent sequels.
Wow.
And we were waiting. We had packed up the office to go over to Paramount to make this movie. And we were waiting and waiting and waiting for the final say of, yes, the budget has been approved. These actors are approved. This person is going to, score it, blah, blah, blah. And then the book came out, and the book came out in galley form first, so that it's the way books come out in Hollywood. The publisher sends it to different studios and different directors to find out if they're interested in adapting. So everybody read this. It blew up. Then it came out a month later on the book stands, became a bestseller, and that was the end of every single deal that she had, every deal. And I stayed employed for another 2 months, but for the first 3 days of the book coming out, the phone wasn't ringing. And we kept checking to make sure that the line wasn't down.
Still connected.
Did you pay the bill? And nobody wanted to talk to her. So the prophetic title of You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again was true. And she ended up years later selling the rights to David Geffen, and it took another 15 years to make the movie. So that was my first.
That was how it all began.
That was my first intro to, here's how it begins and here's how to end it really fast.
Yeah, life lessons through somebody else.
Life lesson through somebody else. You learn, if you're lucky to learn from other people's mistakes, take that lesson.
100%.
And when
so what was that pivotal moment that sort of then took you from that position of being an assistant to a producer to being a producer in your own right?
A friend of mine rang me up. Somebody I had gone to school with in England was working for a top commercial producer, doing television commercials, high-end $1 million commercials back in 1990. And I went in, became a production coordinator, worked with him for almost 2 years, got hired as a production manager at the competition because I had lived in Europe and spoken a couple of languages, and this gentleman shot in Europe a lot. They were like, yeah, come along. I started producing commercials for him at the age of 27. They were global shoots. We shot stuff he loved to go to Italy every summer. So we shot the most banal, basic stuff, against a white psych, but he was a big enough star that everybody would go to Italy to, film the Breck shampoo, or we did Volkswagen in Brazil and something in Japan and something in Sweden and something in Denmark. And I was like, this is a lot of fun. The opportunity to produce for him, because he was notoriously difficult, and I didn't know that before I went to work with him. I had no idea that he was supposedly this crazy, difficult person. And within our first meeting, nobody calls me Tommy except for my grandma, right? And the only person that ever called me Tommy was Grammy, and we were getting ready for a big meeting, and he had all his clients in his room. And I've got to just preface this with, I love the man. I absolutely love the man. I loved him. I loved his wife. I loved everything about the experience. But we were getting ready for a big pre-production meeting with all the clients. I was in the other room putting together, stapled things and things to hand out. And he called out, "Hey, Tommy, what the hell are we waiting for?" And I was like, "Hey, Bobby, give me a minute." And then there was quiet. And I realized I may have overstepped. And his head pops around the corner and he looks at me, because I'm the new employee. And he looks at me and he goes, "I like you, kid." And I was like, "Yeah, I like you too." And we worked together for years after that and had such a
That's amazing.
magnificent camaraderie. And the woman, Patty Graney, who worked with him, I still am just enamored and in love with, and so grateful for those opportunities. But when the time for a permanent producer came on, because Patty would produce most of his stuff, she was his wife, and that made perfect sense. And I had been her production manager, and then started producing when she was unable to. And they decided to slot in her brother, his brother-in-law, into the producer thing. And he hadn't produced. And so I was asked to assist him, and I realized I was training my replacement. And again, no animosity whatsoever, because I learned so much from them. It was unbelievable. And they were so kind and generous, and I will forever be grateful. But somebody that I had worked with previously was now working at Sony Pictures and called and said, "We're doing this big 3D IMAX movie. It needs visual effects. Have you ever done visual effects?" And I said, "No, never once. Don't know anything about it." And he said, "You'll like everybody. We'll teach you." And again, the graciousness of that gesture. I went over and got a job at a studio, and it was supposed to be 7 months, and it turned out to be 15 months. And because nobody knew how to do 3D IMAX visual effects. It's not that I had fucked it up. Literally.
Nobody knew.
So we were inventing as we went along. And the woman who hired me, and again, just absolute gratitude to her, Charlotte Huggins. She was the queen of visual effects at the time, 3D visual effects. And she gave me a book called The Language of Visual Effects. And she said, go to these meetings, take a number 1 pencil, the lighter pencil, not number 2, and certainly not ink. And when anybody mentions anything and you don't know what it is, write that down in your number 1 pencil, whatever that phrase is, whether it's rotoscoping, garbage matting, green screen, whatever, motion control, this, that, and the other thing. Then come and say, "Let me check into that and get back to you." And I would go back to my office and look up, what is rotoscoping? How long do you need for motion control? And it was all in this magnificent book. And
so we're talking like early to mid 90s by this stage?
94.
Yeah. So the Google phenomenon that we know today just didn't exist. You couldn't just search it on your smartphone. It was a completely different era.
This was when your smartphone was like this.
Yeah.
And, nobody could afford a smartphone. Certain people had them in in their cars, but they were ridiculously expensive. And the ones that we
Yeah.
would bring to set were in suitcases, like little
Uh,
mini, suitcases.
the big
Yeah,
Motorola
you
case.
couldn't afford it. The production could afford it, but you couldn't as an individual. We still had pagers. And
Yeah.
so we did this movie, and it was great. And the director was a guy named Jean-Jacques Arnaud, and he had won the Oscar for The Bear and the. No, he won the Oscar for Black and White and Color, but he did The Bear and The Lover and Quest for Fire and 7 Years in Tibet, and just the
Amazing.
best guy with the craziest shock of, you know, insane hair and just happy all the time. And it's funny because I learned a really good lesson from him. At the end of the movie, we went we went to lunch, and we walked into the commissary at Sony, and everybody said hello to him. Oh, you're here. It's so good to see you. And again, this man just sort of exuded confidence, but also sort of this friendly joy. And and I sat down and I said, everybody loves you. It's amazing. And he said, I came to America 26 years ago, and 4 hours after I got off the plane, they handed me an Academy Award. I love this place. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot to love. And he goes, you can seduce people into getting your way, or you can berate and attack and assault them into getting your way. But it's a lot easier to seduce, and it's so much more French. And I was like, and it's a good life lesson, you know? And
Yeah.
because that was 3D effects, I got a call from a production company to say, artist is making a music video. It's a global shoot. We realize you've done global shoots. It's got a lot of visual effects. It's kind of prominent. Are you available? And they wouldn't tell me who it was. And but it was for Sony, and I was told it had a good budget, and the production company at the time was a good company. And I had the option of working on um, the original Space Jam. Uh, uh, the gentleman who was directing that was also a commercial producer with a not great reputation. And I went in and had the meeting, got the job, and came to realize I can't be on this for 14 months. And called the
Yeah.
people back saying, "Yeah, I'll come in. I'll certainly meet on it. Please, please know I'm interested." And I went in, and that was when they said, "Oh, it's Michael Jackson, and it's the Earth Song video off of his History album," which at that point, uh, uh, everybody started buying, and it
Yeah.
was a great song, and they had good money for it.
Phenomenal.
And it was broken into two factions. There was one uh, overall producer, and then there was somebody producing the foreign aspects to it, and that was me. And then somebody produced. So it shot in Tanzania, Brazil, and Croatia during the war, but it also shot in New Jersey. And somebody handled the New Jersey portion, and Michael was the New Jersey portion because Michael um, uh, was not interested in going back to Brazil, and was unfortunately at the time uh, was undergoing some legal entanglements and couldn't. But he also had mistakenly and unintentionally offended the president of Tanzania because he didn't take his glove off when he shook his hand. So he was non grata.
Right.
And so we shot all this stuff in Brazil, and it was amazing. And in Africa, we took canoes down the Amazon to get to our location. We were in tents out in Africa, like far deep in the Serengeti. We had a military escort in Zagreb, in Croatia, because the war was still going on.
Incredible.
And they told us we weren't allowed to step off of any paved roads for fear of mines. We had, when you looked out from our hotel, the only vehicles in the parking lot had the UN written on them so that people would know not to bomb them. And so obviously his record label wouldn't let him go to Croatia. and then we had to go back
Yeah.
to New York at the end for a green screen shoot. So finally, that's when I met him. At the shoot.
Yeah. And I mean, but what one experience? I mean, because I mean, MJ was famous for really taking video clips from being just something to attach to a song to being a massive part of storytelling
Mm-hmm.
to massive productions. I mean, Earth songs, what 6 odd minutes? You know,
6
so
minutes, and
it's not
30 years ago, that 6 minutes had a $4 million budget.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what was it like? I mean, you'd obviously worked on some stuff, but I mean, working on a film clip for MJ is is another level. Like that must have been a pretty amazing experience. Despite all the travel and those sorts of things,
Oh
just his
no,
aura, his
no.
just being in his
Even the
presence must have
even the
been pretty
travel was
crazy.
magnificent.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, I had worked at Sony for years. I was great friends with this magnificent girl, Pamela Aberg, who now runs Sony Travel. Originally, my father, who had worked for TWA forever, when we moved to the States after he retired, he opened his own travel agency. And I was like, oh, you should handle our travel. After the fourth time we were changing the schedule, in 2 days, he was like, maybe somebody else should do this. The uh, Pamela Aberg handled our travel, set us up on KLM. So KLM still doesn't have first class. So every business class, and we were budgeted for business class, was actually first class. She got us everywhere we
Wow.
needed to go. It worked out absolutely magnificently. Um, but you would get to places like Tanzania. I had always wanted to go to Africa. I had, since a child, and you watch those Richard Attenborough specials or the Tarzan TV show, and you have this picture in your head, and it's so far surpassed what my expectations were. And the level, I remember so vividly, the level of like gratitude of how did I get here? How did this happen? How did I
Yeah.
get chosen, to do this? And it was a very small traveling crew. Um, it was me, my production manager, the director, overall producer, camera woman who was magnificent, and her assistant, and everybody else we picked up in all the different places. When we went to Croatia, and it was during the war, the studio had been closed for 4 years. They weren't going to turn down a Michael Jackson video, and they opened Yadran Studios for the first time in 4 years, and they opened one building for us. And it was like a ghost town, and there were weeds growing out of it. You walk onto any lot here, Sony or Paramount or Burbank or Disney or whatever, and it's pristine and it's gorgeous and it's this phenomenal
Uh-huh.
whatever. They opened the elephant doors to this one studio stage where they stored the cameras, and bats flew out because nothing had been open. And they had a generator outside. They didn't want to turn on all the power for, like the whole place. So they had a generator for us so we could work out of this one portion of it. And again, we had a military escort, so all of a sudden these opportunities where you're filming scenes of war while people are going on, through
Yeah.
this devastating war. We were using helicopters as wind machines, um, because it had to be this sort of, life-shaking, earth-shattering event. And there had been damage to these buildings from bombing, and they would the Bell helicopters would knock over a wall. People were like, on any shoot, you scratch
Man.
somebody's wall, right? Because you didn't put bubble wrap or layout board. You scratch it, you've got to, it's so close to a lawsuit, and you're not getting your deposit back. Meanwhile, we're knocking over buildings. We're not in Tanzania. The huts that the Maasai live in, they're called manyatas. We blew over a manyata, and they were
Oh
like,
no.
it's Michael Jackson. And what was so wild,
Yeah.
we learned at the time the three most iconic images in the world at the time were, in order, Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola bottle, Mickey Mouse, and Michael Jackson. Everybody knew him
I mean,
the moment you saw him. So
yeah, just iconic.
it was beyond iconic. We had, when we drove out to the camp out in Tanzania, one of the amazing things, because we were so far out on location, it took about 2 hours from the town of Arusha out to where we were at the Tarangire State Park. And our Land Rovers, people would slow down for, workers or people walking along the dirt road to get to wherever. And it could be a Maasai warrior, and it could be a, lady selling her wares, but she had to get to the next town. And they would just latch on or sit on the roof. So you had, it was like possums on possums on their mother when they all attached like that. But almost everybody was like, who are the white people? Who's
Yes.
who's that one guy in the back? And they're like, oh, they're doing a Michael Jackson video. Everybody knew. Oh, Michael
Yeah.
Jackson, Michael Jackson. So that was kind of funny and crazy and weird. And after a while, we would get to different places, and enough people told the secret, because when you do these things, you pretend you're filming a mayonnaise commercial. It's always mayonnaise. It's always mayonnaise, no matter who you're shooting. It's mayonnaise, because who wants to hang around to watch you film a mayonnaise?
The most macabre
Yeah,
commercial ever.
truly, nobody wants to. Nobody wants to get more information. And the different places, Brazil at the end, everybody knew it was Michael Jackson, and that kind of got a little weird. But again, the great fortune about that was he was not traveling with us, so I didn't have to deal with his security or special arrangements or anything like that. And then
That'd be pretty hectic for a producer.
well, it's just an absolute additional layer of, usually their team handles it, and you just have to make the hotel and car and flight security arrangements, but their team will handle the bodyguards and this, that, and the other thing. We shot a Katy Perry video 10 years ago, and Katy is a superstar and has very similar, and once again, it was a mayonnaise commercial, in London, and we were in the center of London, and God bless her, the hotel that she stayed at a hotel. We stayed at Cafe Royal in Piccadilly Circus. She stayed at the Dorchester. Their level of security for her level of status was better, and
Yep.
Just these things you wouldn't really think about, but because
Yeah.
these people come onto your televisions and into your living rooms, and you've grown up listening and appreciating and adoring and loving them, you think you know them, and yet you don't,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like absolutely everybody else, you can have a great day, you can have a brilliant day, you can have the worst day of your life, you can find out that your dog's sick, you can find out that your mom fell, you can blah blah blah, whatever it is. So the expectation that at any moment this person that you grew up with loving is going to be so warm and embracing of you and who you are, that's like, I'm sorry to dash that expectation. It's not going to happen. And you kind of learn, especially living in LA, everybody deserves their own space.
Yeah.
If you happen to be trapped in an elevator with Dave Grohl, sure, say hi, acknowledge him, but don't, that's it.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I mean, you've worked with Dave and the band as well, in terms of Pretender. Another, I've noticed a bit of a theme when we look at things like Earth Song and the Pretender. Wind and water seems to feature quite heavily with a lot of the things you end up involved in. Is that part of what you have to deal with from a
Oh,
producer's end of things? Is
absolutely.
like, how am I going to deal with all this
Yes,
wind and water?
absolutely. We did water tests on the Pretender. We did with fire hoses. We went to visual effects companies, went to special effects companies. The difference being, one does it in the computer, one does it practical. And what is the correct amount of pressure so that you don't kill the rock star, which is frowned upon.
I can
It's never a
understand
good
that, you know.
idea to kill the band, to kill the lead singer.
Exactly.
So yeah, we did tests out in the valley, and then we filmed at a place called Barker Hangar, which is out in Santa Monica, and built that whole set, that floor, got those 50 guys, got those 50 costumes, And
Yeah, Howard.
I love that band. I love that band. That
Yeah,
but all of them, not just Dave, all of them, every single one of them
yeah,
were everything you wanted them to be. You know,
yep,
totally cool rock stars, just rock stars,
yeah,
but funny and smart and talented and professional and on time and had a blast and gracious and excited and enthusiastic. And the gentleman from their label, same thing. Their video commissioner, Lauren, was just everything about that shoot was fun. I'm still really, really happy with that one. I mean, the number that I'm
yeah.
like
I mean, it's
really
an
happy with,
amazing
but
clip.
when you love the band as much and you're like, oh, we did good,
Yeah,
we did good, and
yeah,
it doesn't
definitely,
drive your
definitely.
ego. It's just like I still listen to them. I still listen to that song. It comes. The funny part about what I do is every now and then you're walking in a shopping mall or in the pharmacy and you start singing along with whatever song and it sounds so familiar and you realize, oh, I produced that. The reason it sounds familiar, I listened to it 700 times through the shoot day and through the edit and through the this, that, and the other thing. And yeah, so there was one time
It's, I
I
mean,
was at we have a pharmacy just up the street from me, and I was shopping, and three of the songs that I had done videos for were, like over out of five, three of them I just videos for, and I was like, this is kind of weird, but how do you celebrate while you're buying, toilet paper and shampoo?
yeah. It always happens a bit internally.
Exactly.
There's every other shopper wonders why you've got this wry
Mhm.
smile on your face, but it's it's only you really know.
Happy with my
What those
shampoo and
things.
toilet paper purchase.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I did have a good look through some of the videos. I mean, Paralyzer, Fingers 11 doesn't probably feature heavily on people's playlists, but it's a fantastic
That
track and very cool video.
So the funny thing about that, this is actually a sweet story. I had that record label, Wind Up. I had done the Creed Higher video for, so that had become this very successful video, and we shot in
Oh yeah,
Florida, and everybody.
more
Yeah.
water, or was it
No,
Higher that had the
Higher
water
didn't
in
have
it? No, that
Higher.
didn't.
um,
Oh, that was one of their other ones. They were up to their
Yeah,
neck in water.
yeah.
I was thinking you might have been on that one too.
Um, so it was the same record label, but they had changed video commissioners, and so the video commissioner, we had met. Here very briefly. Her boss was leaving and introduced me to this woman, Gail Marowitz. And we met at a hotel, and it was very nice to meet her. And then maybe 5 weeks later, I flew to New York to bring one of our directors around to different record labels to introduce them. And when I got back to Wind Up Records and we are to meet this video commissioner, the president of the label, the co-president, Diana Meltzer, saw me in the lobby and pulled me into her office. And I said, we have a meeting. It's great to see you. I have a meeting. They're going to be fine. And literally walked me into the office and locked the door and started playing music. What do you like? What do you like? What do you think of this band? This, that, and the other thing. And I loved Diana. She was out of her mind. She was absolutely, but a genius at what she did. She was the head of A&R and her husband owned the record label. So I sat in her office for an hour listening to, no, she had signed a band called Evanescence. What do you think of them? You know, she had signed a band called Stretch Princess. What do you think of that? You know, what do you think of that? We're putting this single out. Meanwhile, the director has no idea where I've gone, right? Because some lady dragged me away, right? And so he and this woman, Gail Marowitz, sit to have a meeting, having no idea where I am, right? And it was very odd. So I finally get out of the office and I walk into hers and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Diana pulled me in. She goes, I figured. You know? She then says, we're going to do this video for Paralyzer. And then um, the budget's going to be approved. And then she disappeared, right? And we knew that we were going to shoot, but all of a sudden all phone calls stopped. And we found out because I was getting no response from phone calls or emails that very, very unfortunately, Gail's brother had passed away unexpected. So a life-altering, heartbreaking moment. And we sent her flowers, thinking none of this is important. Life and your family is always more important. And 6 weeks later, she called and said, I really appreciate it. I appreciated those flowers. Nobody else that I had done business with, other than people within, and my friends, had sent flowers. We're going to do this video. We're going to do it at the end of the month. I'm going to come out, but life is a little tough and rough for me. And I was like, we will treat you with kid gloves, I promise. And she came out, and without exaggeration and no pretense to it, Gail Marowitz has become one of my closest friends, dearest friends. We had the greatest time on that shoot. We actually mentioned it 2 days ago when we were calling. The choreographers were fantastic, like unbelievable. The dancers were great. The band was so excited because I had done a video for them 10 years before when they were like goth and kind of weird up in
Right.
Toronto, and auditioning dancers and that many dancers is always funny. You need to display remarkable talent to us almost immediately, and so many times you've worked with the choreographer, but when you're looking, the choreographer who's holding the auditions, but often you're looking for a specific look. So you can be finding someone new that they haven't worked with. And there was a moment, and I won't repeat it, when just under my breath I said something, and she has never forgotten it and said that that's what cemented our friendship. And for the last 18 years, we have gone on holidays, we have traveled the world, we have done numerous shoots, we are on the phone as a support team to each other every couple of days. She called this morning. We had an earthquake this morning. She called to make sure it was fine, nothing, nobody had nothing, got whatever. But
just a little shake.
It was a 4.7 over in Malco, so it wasn't so little. It was large enough for my dog to go, what the fuck is going on? I didn't sign up for this. But yeah, I feel very, very fortunate because so many people that I have worked with throughout the years. Danny Lockwood was over at Capitol. Kate Miller was at Capitol. People that truly I just feel lucky to know and work with, and have remarkable memories. Danny worked at Capitol Records. We did a bunch of stuff like Katy Perry, and prior when Kate Miller was over there, a number of different videos, including OK Go and stuff like that. And but my friend Danny called and said, please come pick me up at Capitol at noon, and we're going to go somewhere. Do you have plans? And I was like, no, I can be there. Why? Because I can't tell you. And I picked him up, and he came to the front, and he said, okay, now we're driving over to SIR Studios. SIR is Studio Instrument Rentals. And it's where you rent your pianos and guitars and, microphones and amplifiers and all that kind of stuff. But it also has rehearsal rooms all over the place. And that's where bands practice 24/7 for their tours, and it's got
Mm-hmm.
all of the facility management stuff to help make that happen. And we walk into a room, and he still hasn't told me what's going on. And there are 12 people total in a room that is maybe 18 feet wide by 25 feet, with the piano, bass, keys, a couple of microphones. And we're there to hear Annie Lennox singing 6 songs off of her Nostalgia album, her sort of, American Songbook album. And it's the
Incredible.
record label people and me. And she comes out, and I have fucking adored that voice since the first time those sweet dreams, came around. And I just sat there, sort of like every single hair, even hair that hadn't grown, was standing up, And
Yep.
she sang her 6 songs to let them know what the album content was, and so that they could start planning the promotion and the advertising and this, that, and the other thing. And it was everything I could do as a complete adult in time and space not to burst into tears and go, how the fuck
Yeah.
did I get here? Why did, how did this happen? It was such a, I am eternally grateful to him for that. But there have been numerous moments of like, but, and then you put it into perspective of like, oh, well, he and I had worked on these different jobs, and he knew the kind of music,
Yep.
that I listened to, and the kind of things that I gravitate to. And we had delivered successful product, because music videos are product. You're selling that brand of
Yeah.
artist, that brand of, but there is a business behind it. It's not just, you know,
Exactly.
but my part isn't the business. My part is helping facilitate the visuals with the right director, and
Yeah.
the way the process works is they will send us a song and say, what are your ideas? But they won't just come to me. They'll go to like 10 other people and say, what is your idea for this or for this? What we want to do with Katy is this. She is energetic and fun loving and a joy to be around and smart and, this, that, and the other thing, and can dance and can do this, that, and the other thing. And she looks good like this, but we want to kind of push her over to this. And, maybe this one will be, like blah, blah, blah. And so there's a brief that you get, and then you choose the director that you think is right for it, out of your stable of directors, and they submit a idea, and you're one step closer if they ask, what would the budget on this be? Here's how much we have to spend. What is the budget? And then you're one step closer if they say, Katy would like to have a conversation with the director, or whatever artist, or
Yep.
management, and this, that, and the other thing are going to get on the phone. And so there have been certain times when because now everyone's phone is their calendar as well. It's like, oh, we have a call with Mariah Carey tomorrow, 4 o'clock in the afternoon to discuss the shoot, and you're all the people that are going to be on it. But it's just like, okay, so here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to plan it. And it's always kind of very collaborative. They
Yeah.
will have an idea. The artist will, sometimes the artist has a great idea, and you just have to like figure out how to turn that into something visual. And sometimes they don't
Yep.
have any idea at all, and it's like wide open. What has this song inspired in your director? And
I mean, it's interesting hearing you talk about that, right back to, the fostering of an 18-year relationship to that collaboration. And I guess one of the key things as to why we wanted to create this podcast and why we called it Creative Glue was looking for those secret ingredients that actually make up the creative universe, which is so much more. I mean, my world is around branding and
mhm.
advertising, building campaigns, building, logo designs and brand architecture. But the creative industry is just so massive and so broad and so different. But there just seems to be something that's common about that. And listening to you talk, it's really interesting to hear, I suppose, how important those relationships are, and how that seems to be part of the secret ingredients that bonds people together is the establishment of those relationships, genuine, authentic
Yeah,
relationships.
it's funny. Again, it is collaborative. It has to be collaborative. And the whole reason that I called the company Collaboration Factory instead of Thom Fennessey Presents, you know, which I'm really not that ego driven. But I can tell you what a great edit is, and I can help you improve your edit, but I can't edit. I know how to press
Yeah,
rewind, and I know how to press play, and I know how to press pause, you know. But how to get all of that stuff into the timeline, and work and sync, I don't know how to do. You interviewed Sophie Neudorfer, who I love.
yes,
Sophie will come up with an idea that is so far removed from what you thought it should be, but has taken it so far past the goal line that it's inevitable that we're just going to follow her that way, and that's the art and spirit of collaborating, and
yeah,
while I may have an idea about here's what Mariah Carey should do. Mariah has an idea, her managers have an idea, her record label has an idea, somebody else has an idea. And it's like, okay, we'll pick the best idea. Maybe it's a mixture of all five, or maybe
yep,
it's just exactly what she wants the way she wants it. But we can still
yeah,
make that happen. We can still stand back and be proud of the work that we helped to bring together. And yes, we've worked in advertising. I've been very, very lucky with advertising because music videos, I'm sure you've heard, the music industry insignificantly from the $4 million budget on Michael Jackson. When you're getting calls for
yes,
$40,000 and we need to make them a star, and you realize you've ended up at 1/100th of a % of where you've started, but they still want star profits.
yes.
And but so
And is that sort of like, again, like that relationship, the link with Sophie goes back to the Pretender video, because she worked on Pretender with you,
yeah,
didn't she? Is that where it started? And then, of course, she ends up in the commercial side of the Chevy commercial with
yeah,
Glee.
yeah. Well,
So, you
okay.
know,
So the funny thing, she. This has happened a couple of times, and this has actually been other people's experience with me as well. She was an assistant to someone, and she is from Austria. And when I was growing up,
mm,
first we lived in Switzerland, then we lived in Germany, and then we lived in London. So I was over there for 15 years. Um, I learned how to ski in Austria. We used to go to Austria, every winter, this, that, and the other thing. And we met and we started speaking German, but like ridiculous German, like German that a 5-year-old speaks. There are certain songs about candies or this, that, and the other thing, or just like certain introductory phrases that you learn, but we just got along. And if you are
yeah,
going to work 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, in the case of Glee, because we had 1 week to get that together, we had one
wow,
week. We were literally working in shifts. She had she had shifts going. She had people on 8-hour shifts 3 times a day and 12-hour shifts, and literally people
wow.
working through the night. And we made it work. And I smoked like there was no tomorrow. I drank more coffee than any human should consume. We built 68 costumes. She built that set. We had so little
Mm,
time, all we needed was money, and because it was Chevrolet with Glee, one of the top shows from one of the top
mhm,
producers at a major network for the biggest commercial extravaganza in the US. It's like, okay, you need money? How much money you need? We need this much. And you test them. We need this much. And they said, okay. We were like, okay, well, then you'll get exactly what you want. And
There we go.
here
Done.
we go, done. And everybody worked their asses off without
Yeah.
exaggeration. I mean, there was, but going back to what you were saying, very, very fortunately, because I have been around for a long time and I have met really extraordinary people who are so good at their craft, but at the same time are the type of people that you don't mind spending 12, 14, 16. We're no longer allowed to work over 16 hours. You know, it became a
Yeah.
rule. Number of,
I can
yeah.
understand why.
But there's an adrenaline high, and there's caffeine, and there's
Yeah.
power bars, and there's food, and there's always food. There's always food. There's food everywhere, to keep you going. But we had my friend Chris Evans, not to be confused with superstar actor Captain America, Chris Evans. Chris Evans, the female makeup artist, I met when I was a production coordinator, and she has done all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. She's done all of the Michael Bay movies. She has done all of Jerry Bruckheimer's movies. She has done all of Woody Allen's movies. She designed the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway and Miss Saigon on Broadway and this, and the other thing, and blah,
Wow.
blah, blah. And she just finished the new Francis Ford Coppola Megalopolis movie. The resume just blows absolutely everybody out of the water. And I was like, I need 16 of the top hair and makeup artists because we have 60 women, dancers that we have to get ready. And we also have the entire cast of Glee and we need this, that, and the other thing. And she was like, 16? I need 24, to get them ready by the thing. And it's like, okay, you'll get it. These people, her credits are phenomenal. The rest of the team was
Yeah.
like just beyond. It was mind blowing. Paula Bradley, the costumer, she designs. She used to run. So we met 25 years ago. The joke is, if we don't fall, madly in love again, we will marry each other and go into retirement. Um, I met her when she first moved here out of from England. She had been on tour with Phil Collins and The Cure, and moved to LA to try to make it. I gave her. We worked on a Joe Satriani video for no money. She blew it out of the park. I've used every opportunity ever since for the last 25 years to work with her. She now runs American Horror Story and all of the Ryan Murphy shows that Lou Eyrick, who is the main costumer, who she is now ascended to producer. She oversees the aesthetic. Paula had run Gwen Stefani's fashion line. She designed the look for the Pussycat Dolls. Just she put Jennifer Lopez in that dress, and she put Celine Dion in that, and this, that, and the other thing. So she
Outrageous.
came and got her army of costumers to make these costumes. Again, it was all like in an 8-day period. We had from January 2nd, and we could shoot with the cast on January 9th, and 9th, 10th, and 11th. And but everything had to be ready for them because they were also shooting their TV show. And,
Yeah.
the gentleman who shot it for us, Russell Carpenter, had filmed a movie. Have you ever heard of the movie? It's about the boat Titanic.
Yes.
So he shot Titanic. Literally, you find the best people possible. You find the best people possible so the least things can go wrong, and so that the most acceptable solutions can become reality when needed.
Mm.
Because there was not one person on that project who hadn't encountered something but knew how to instinctively handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and the way that came about was Gail Marowitz, who I had mentioned before, from the record label, wanted me to meet this guy, Dante Di Loreto, who had just moved to California to run Ryan Murphy Productions. And we met and we all went sailing. And he was such a great, nice, good man. and just funny and new to California and now in this job. And he had called me up saying, "So you do commercials and music videos? We have to do this commercial for, oh, we're doing this show. It's about a high school choir." And he explained the show. And I remember being on that boat as he's sailing us around the harbor thinking, God, that sounds horrible. Who would watch that?
And next thing
Cut
you know,
to, it's Glee. Well, why didn't you tell me it was Glee? You know? And a year into it, when it became this global success, he called and said, "We need to do music videos and commercials for the different songs we're putting out. You know, could you do them?" So the first one was an American
yeah,
Express commercial with Jane Lynch, who is just everything that you want her to be and 20 times more in person and magnificent. And when we were shooting the American Express commercial, she was also getting ready to host the Emmys. And so, like, the
right,
schedule was whack, everything was crazy. She was unbelievable. The job went really well. And a month later, they said, "We have to do this Super Bowl commercial. Can you do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, sure." He called on December 20th. We have to shoot a Super Bowl commercial. And I was like, "Okay, when?" And it was like, first week of January. Super Bowl spots, just so you know, are usually shot in
yeah,
September or October because they have to go
yeah, at
through so
least
much
because
testing.
you got February, well, end of January, February is Super
February
Bowl.
is
Like,
Super Bowl. So,
yeah,
everybody this week in LA is gearing up for their Super Bowl spots, or getting awarded their Super Bowl spots. So he calls December 20th. And I said, "What's the budget and what are we doing? What are we shooting?" And he goes, "Studio's closed. Everybody's gone for Christmas. We won't be back until January 2nd. I was like, "I can work over the holidays. It's not worth it. Everybody's gone. Nobody's going to have any answers. Ryan's left town. The agency is closed, this, that, and the other thing." So all I knew is I had a job at the very beginning of the year and I had no idea what we were filming. And everything's closed January 1st, January 2nd. They sent over a script. Script didn't really make a lot of sense. It was an idea that tied into the television show, but it didn't adhere to standards and practices for advertising, and especially for a car commercial.
uh,
I had watched the show rather religiously and was delighted by it. It was so much fun when it came out, and
yeah,
understood the character that they were featuring. I had done so many car commercials. I had done Mercedes and VW and Jaguar and this, that, and the other thing. But I had also done Gap commercials. And Gap commercials over here back a long time ago were all singing, all dancing, big, epic whatevers. And knowing that her character is sort of based on Barbara Streisand, I watched a bunch of the early Barbara Streisand specials because they kept referring to them in the show. And I was like, here is the simplest thing. At the end of all of these specials, she just stands on a white cyc and sings because she's got that voice, and who needs anything else? And I was like, what if we do this? And they were like, let's run it up the flagpole, the proverbial flagpole. And very quickly, with the editor in the office, we pulled together a bunch of Gap commercials and pulled in the scenes from the old Streisand specials and some Gene Kelly stuff from An American in Paris Against a White Cyc. Sent it over to them. They sent it to the agency. They came back 4 hours later. Yes, let's do this. Boom. That's what we had to plan. That was all on January 2nd, and we had to shoot on the 9th, and we did. That
yeah.
happened.
I mean, it's very cleverly put together. I mean, even the time with how the show structure goes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you missed on Glee,
Yep.
and off you go
Yeah.
and do it. It was very, very tightly produced. It was great. I think it was a really amazing
I
spot.
recall at the end of that job, because there was an army of 120 people off camera making that happen. all the dancers, all the cast, this, that, and the other thing. That staircase that goes up into the sky, which was 35 feet high, supported by wires. You know, the staircase that the showgirls dance around, this, that, and the other thing, was slippery. Paula Bradley had to like put stuff on the bottom of their shoes because we couldn't paint sand into the thing because it had to, you know, to make it traction, this, that, and the other thing. But I remember going out at the end of the shoot after everybody said goodbye and said thank you and, you know, God, that was great, this, that, and the other thing, sitting on the back of the truck smoking a cigarette, just like, thank God nobody got hurt. Nobody went to the hospital. Nobody fell off of that thing. You know, nobody, like, we had people falling out of the sky on those wires. Nobody got caught in the wires. Nobody bumped into the, you know, we had people flipping, the aerialists flipping over cars. Nobody got hit by a car. Nobody smacked into a car. Nobody broke their foot or ankle. I was just so relieved afterward of just like, okay, it worked. And everybody had a good time, you know? And again, that's one of
Yeah.
those things where you're just like, that, yes, that's plotting and planning, but that's also a great deal of luck, you know, because there have been,
Yeah. You got to have a bit of that.
you gotta have a lot of that. I remember years ago, there was a TV show, the Jenny McCarthy show. Did Jenny make it over to you guys? Not
I'm not
the show,
sure.
but her as a person. She was a MTV, very sexy, like Playboy, you know, whatever, and very funny, very like sharp as a tack, sort of a modern Marilyn Monroe. And we were doing Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, an exact duplicate of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes down the pink staircase that Madonna did in her
Yep.
video. And the day we were doing this with 25 male dancers in tuxedos and top hats, they called at 7 o'clock saying she fell down the steps. She broke her ankle. She can't reschedule, so we have to shoot. And the entire thing, you can't tell that she has a broken ankle. Everything is immediately choreographed around the fact that she could not move her foot. And every opportunity she got,
Yeah.
she sat down with the nurse who would give her another whatever, you know, and wrap it in ice and this, that, and the other thing. And but the choreographer on that is a legend named Marguerite Derricks. She had done well the infamous Showgirls, but um, you know, Austin Powers and all that kind of stuff. And she
Very
figured out
cool.
in an hour, here's what we do. You know, here's how we get the exact same thing that we've been rehearsing all week, and no one will ever know, and nobody ever did.
I love that. I love that. I'm curious, you know, you've got such a broad spectrum in terms of, you know, commercial and, you know, films for video clips and music. But I know short films has become something for you as well, and I took some time to especially to watch The
Mm.
Rising, which I found like quite an emotional journey. I mean that was a piece that really got to me as I walked through that. Again, thinking of those, you know, that really came about, you know, in terms of, you know, that speaks to relationships as
Mm-hmm.
well. I suppose in terms of the power of that, in those things. How did you make that transition then, you know, in terms of those other genres to end up being a producer on something like that?
I'm really proud of that one. So I'm glad you mentioned that one. And it's also very water related. Going back to what
Yeah, it's a lot. That's a lot of water as well. That
um,
one.
uh, back when I was a production manager, our location manager said, I want to do a short film. I want to start directing films, and a short is the way to do it. This was 30 years ago. And she gave me a script, and it was funny. And we got all of our friends and the whole crew that worked on the commercials and said, would you do this? It's a 3-day commitment. And everybody did it. And she really did the best she could. And we did it. And ultimately, perhaps at the time, she wasn't ready to transition into directing, right? But I learned it's essentially like putting together a commercial. It's just a short format of it. the next person to call and say, hey, I want to do a short film. I heard you worked with my friend, so-and-so, and she had a really good experience. We want to do this. And it was more established actresses. And
Yep.
at the time, over here in the States, a number of them were like, oh, that's the girl from that, And so Kathy Moriarty had been in Raging Bull. Kathy Najimy had been in Sister Act. Beth Broderick was on a show called Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Lee Garlington always showed up as somebody's wife. Julie Haggerty was from the Airplane movies. We did the film. Again, it was a really great experience. It was a lot of fun. It's how I met. So agents in LA don't always speak the right language, and the DP who came in thought he was meeting on a feature film. He didn't realize he was being sent from his agency to work on a short film. And his name was Ralph Boda. He had shot Saturday Night Fever and Cinderella with Whitney Houston and Brandy and Gypsy
Wow.
with Bette Midler and this, that, and the other thing. But he thought he was meeting for a feature. And we had no money. And he agreed to do it.
Yeah.
And then literally every job after that I had the opportunity to hire him on, because he was at the top of his game. He was he was such a mensch, like such a good man. And once we got him, everybody offered. We got free cameras. We got, he was a legend. We got free cameras. We got grip and lighting people who just offered because they wanted to learn from him. And he was like this benevolent
Yeah.
mentor to people and just funny and a good guy. So then she told this other guy named Jason Gould, and Jason Gould was doing something. Jason was a young actor, and he had grown up in Hollywood. His mom is Barbara Streisand, and his father's Elliot Gould. And he had written a short film and said, would you produce this? And I read the script, and I'm always interested in stories that might, when they're happening, might push an envelope or might make you think about something maybe a little differently. It that's what I gravitate to, And
Yeah.
we did his. It went to Sundance. It sold. The other one sold as well, except for the first one. But it sold. You could make money. Not you're not getting rich from it, and but you sat there putting out a message into the world, and I was proud of that. So I had experience doing short films when I got, because I've done a ton of advertising, Ad Council of America, which is this charitable foundation here, which puts out, how to prevent forest fires, how to, anti-gun violence, vote,
Mhm.
this, that, and the other thing. They do a campaign every couple of years called Love Has No Labels. And a couple of years ago, John Cena did it walking through small town America about the diversity in America. They did one of X-ray machines that was so fantastic. So it's these giant Jumbotron X-ray machines, and you see these skeletons dancing, and then out comes, a Muslim woman and a black man. Out comes a
Yep.
Hasidic Jew and, a little 4-year-old girl, all this kind of stuff of like,
Yep.
it's about diversity in America, which is moving to the States at 15 and realizing it is not as wild and open and free as the rest of the world was sort of a shock.
Mhm.
So this project came along. I was working in unison with a company based out of London who was trying to make a greater impact in the States at the time. This is the big campaign. They were doing the short film for the first time. The director we had originally contacted and who had agreed to do it had issues on his project that was going on, and it became like a big thing in the press, and it became a situation, and he needed to address that and deal with that. We had already gotten the job based on that Oscar-winning director's attachment.
Right.
So the job was going to go away in 72 hours because we didn't have this Oscar-winning attachment anymore. And I had 3 days to replace him. I called because it's about diversity in America, and they wanted to fulfill these boxes and check these boxes. The first director we had was a gay black man, very prominent. I spent one of my closest friends happens to be a prominent black actress in Hollywood. We called everybody. We called Denzel. We called Debbie Allen. We called Barry Jenkins. We called Ryan Coogler. We called everybody, crossing out the list. The company I was working with represented a guy named David Nutter, who directed Game of Thrones, but he, like me, is a middle-aged white guy. They were never going to buy that. Lena Waithe, who is one of the most prominent writers, black writers, for television in the States right now, and just remarkably talented. I've known through my friend since she was my other friend's assistant, writing assistant. When I pitched the idea of what if we get the guy who's about to launch the 8th season of Game of Thrones and this black queer writer who was the first woman to make the first black gay writer on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine, who has these hit shows on TV. And she suggested an additional writer, another woman who helped finesse this script. So David directed, Lena wrote it. Sorry about that. David directed, Lena wrote it. Again, we brought together like this extraordinary level of talent to design it and do this, that, and the other thing. We shot at Warner Brothers. That location is the exact location where the dinosaur flips over the Jeep in Jurassic Park. It is a tank that you can fill. It's surrounded by greenery. That road that the Jeeps, that the Tyrannosaurus came from. We built the houses. We put the water in. We shot for 5 days. But it is my own personal philosophy of the way the world should work, and very magnificently. And it's funny, so after 72 hours, I had to repitch the exact same story, but with a brand new set of attachments, right? So it wasn't your black gay Oscar winner. It was middle-aged white guy producing, middle-aged white guy directing, but look what else we've brought to it. And they accepted the proposal and said, yeah, this actually works. We can see how this will work. This will work very well, checking off boxes. And everyone who came together on that, and I don't mean to sound like poly-fucking-Anna, because I'm not poly-fucking-Anna. I would like to make that clear. It's not always like, cherries on top and happy, joyous, and free. I have met some major assholes in my life. But this job, everybody that came to it, every single person that came to it, came from such a space of generosity and goodwill and hard work. And, it was 4 night shoots, with thunderstorms and floods and in the water and wearing waders and this, that, and the other thing. But it was so much fun, and there were so many laughs, and the cast was exceptional. Everybody on the crew was exceptional, guided by this guy, David Nutter, who is like a blessing, a mensch of the highest order. And it's funny, I've now mentioned mensch twice. I was not raised Jewish. It's just such a good word. There are so many people that are mensches. Um, Literally 2 weeks ago, the guy from the ad agency, because he and I have remained very good friends, he was one of the executive producers on it, and we had shot in August. And on your phone, how photo memories come up, it's like on this day, and it was
Yeah.
at the end of the fifth day when we were exhausted and the sun was coming up, and we had just called wrap, and everyone's taking like happy photos, and I looked like I had died 2 days prior. And I forgot to suck in my gut, you know. And yeah, just 5 years later, you're like, wow, we made an impact. That made an impact, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was a cross-platform situation over here. So it played on HBO, it played on Showtime, it played on Netflix, it played on this, that, and the other thing. It was promoted on all these different sites, different. You know, HBO obviously promoted it because of David Nutter. Showtime and Paramount promoted it because of Lena Waithe, Ozzy Esquire, who co-wrote it with her. Um, that was her first produced screenplay, and which she co-wrote with Lena,
Right.
but it was her first produced project. And then she went on to have um, she did a show. It was very sweet. She did another show. It was very good. She now writes Bridgerton. Nothing thrills me more. Nothing thrills me more than remember when we did that thing and now
Yep.
you're doing that thing. It it's
I mean, other people must have felt the same way about your career as well. I imagine, in terms of seeing you go from that assistant producer picking up a pot in a box to where you are, where you are today. And those relationships have obviously been such a critical part of the success of your career, and the way that you've taken that through, and the genuine and authentic nature by which you create those relationships helps to bond your creative glue with the people that you not only work with but you call
yeah.
friends.
Well, it's funny. Again, as I said earlier, to me, it's a job, but it's a job that I love doing. It's a job I really love
Yep.
doing. And and even though the last couple of years with COVID, when nobody was working, and last year with the strikes when nobody was working, thank God commercials kept going because that was a different contract.
Yeah.
That wasn't a SAG situation. But this year has been particularly difficult for people because
Mhm.
all of the streamers and all of the content is withdrawing because there wasn't the expansion. Everybody saw this huge explosion when we were all stuck at home because of COVID. But now that we're back out in the world, and it's endemic as opposed to pandemic, and we're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's like everyone is shrinking their budgets, but the opportunities to be creative are still out there, and you just have to figure out how to channel that out. And one of the gentlemen that I had done a short film with, we're doing his first feature together in November and December, and it's we've had other opportunities for some of these shorts to become features, some of the ones that we've done to become features, but then ultimately it's like they haven't happened. And the
Yeah.
idea was always, oh, this is a precursor to what that could be. It didn't happen that way. That's okay. One is,
Mhm.
you know.
Well, I've got one last thing that we love to do with our guests called the Fast Five.
Okay.
Just a quick five questions to with one word answers to see what your responses are. How does that sound?
And his personality.
Daunting. Well, I'll start with an easy one. The first one is best music video clip you've done.
All of them have different, whether the memory associated to it or the people associated with it, the experience with it, where it went. Um, Can I narrow it? I know you wanted a one-word answer. I'm not a one-word answer guy. You may have noticed that by now.
Not at all. Man after my own heart. Top 3.
Katy Perry unconditionally. Foo Fighters, because I love the band. And well, probably Michael Jackson, because it changed the entire trajectory of my career. I worked on that video for 17 weeks and traveled the world. And it was like,
amazing.
Okay, this is what I want to do with my life. So
that they're 3 pretty incredible artists, 3 pretty incredible pieces of production. So can't beat those. I love that. I love it. US or UK?
Both.
Both? Australia, maybe. Have you been out to
no,
Australia?
but I'm working with somebody. We're developing a television show about art and music, and he's based in Sydney. So trust me, I'm used to these 6:30 calls. I know that because he wakes up early, I'm allowed to start calling like around 1:30. You know, he wakes up very early, and then we can have calls until late at night. But I have not yet been to Sydney. There have been 2 opportunities to go, and then both projects canceled.
No, well, we're going to have to get you to Oz, that's for sure. And we have to get you to the West Coast, because it's arguably better than the East Coast. They'll tell you differently, but we know best over here. So, couple of easy ones. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Dogs, easy. Sunset or sunrise?
Sunset.
Love that. And if you could work with any director in the world, who would it be?
Living or dead?
Living or dead?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Amazing. I think I got asked something similar when I was in high school in my yearbook about who I would want to perform with, I wanted to perform with Paul McCartney and John Lennon, of which only 50% of those guys were around. So you're going to have the living and dead aspect, I think. Look, Thom, I have thoroughly enjoyed having a conversation with you, mate. Thank you for your time and your openness and all of the dialect about your career. It's just been amazing. It's so interesting to listen to, and I'm sure our listeners have got a lot from it too. So I really appreciate you joining us today, and for us, it's all we have time for in this episode of Creative Glue. But join us next month as we continue to explore the creative glue that brings us all together. And if you haven't already, please check out the channel of all the rest of our Creative Glue episodes. You can find them on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast. You simply just search Creative Glue Podcast and you'll find everything you need to look for. So like and subscribe, and stay tuned to see who we'll have coming up next on Creative Glue.
We've got the creative